The thing about laughter is, it's easy to share, hard to fake. And for decades, no one has mastered it quite like Steve Harvey, the man with the sharp suits, the quicker wit, and a stage presence big enough to fill any room with joy. He's spent his life making the world laugh, even when life didn't always feel funny. But one night, during a live taping, something unexpected happened. The king of comedy, the man who could turn even a mistake into a punchline, suddenly walked off stage. The audience froze. No jokes, no music, no cue cards. Just silence. For someone who's handled everything from on-air chaos to the infamous Miss Universe mix-up with humor and grace, this moment felt different. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't a skit. It was real. And for the first time, the laughter that built his empire came to a stop. So what really happened that night? What could push one of comedy's toughest men to step away mid-show? Let's rewind and find out what broke through the smile of Steve Harvey. Most people, after a mistake that big, would have disappeared under the stage and stayed there until retirement. But not Steve Harvey. He turned one of television's most awkward moments into comedy gold, cracking jokes, taking the blame head on, and walking away with the same swagger that built his empire. That's the Steve Harvey everyone knows, unshakable, unbreakable, always in control. But this night was different. He stepped onto the stage just like he always did. Sharp suit, polished shoes, that signature mustache, and a smile that could fill a room. The crowd erupted, cameras rolled, and Steve was ready to deliver another night of effortless laughter. Only this time something felt off. Behind the charm, behind the laugh, something was bubbling, something heavy enough that even Steve Harvey, the man who could turn pain into punchlines, couldn't hide. At first, nobody noticed. He warmed up the audience with his usual fire. One joke after another, smooth, confident, magnetic. The crowd was eating it up. But then, between the laughs, came the pauses. His eyes drifted. His timing, usually perfect, razor sharp, began to slip. The rhythm faltered. The audience waited, unsure. Was this a setup for a bigger joke or a moment unraveling in real time? And then it happened. He stopped mid-sentence. A nervous chuckle escaped. He shook his head slowly, muttered something under his breath that only the front row could catch, and then, with one quiet sigh, Steve Harvey dropped the mic. Not like a stunt, not like a joke, like a man finally out of words. He turned and walked off stage. The room froze. This wasn't part of the act. The cameras hesitated, unsure whether to cut. The band played a single unsure note, waiting for the cue that never came. But Steve Harvey didn't return, not right away. And the question rippled through the crowd like static. What just happened? Was it anger, exhaustion, something someone said backstage? Or had the weight of being America's favorite funny man finally caught up to him? Because what the audience didn't know that night, what nobody could see through the lights and laughter, was that Steve Harvey wasn't fighting the show. He was fighting himself. And here's the thing about Steve Harvey: behind every punchline, there's a story. And sometimes the story hurts more than the joke heals. When Steve Harvey feels something, he doesn't feel it quietly. He feels it with his whole heart, loud, raw, and unfiltered. And sometimes that means walking away from the lights, even when the world expects him to keep shining. That night would go down as one of the most unforgettable moments of his career, not because of the jokes he told, but because of the silence he left behind. In that silence, the truth started to echo, the real story of Steve Harvey, the man behind the laughter. So what broke through the armor of a man who's made millions laugh through their own pain? What truth was so heavy that even his legendary humor couldn't carry it anymore? The answer was faith, and the weight that comes with it. "I've been going to church all my life," Steve once said, "and I know something about it now. But there's some things I just wish they'd stop doing up at the church." It wasn't anger. It was honesty, the kind that slips out when you've spent a lifetime trying to balance who the world sees and who you really are. That's all. And you probably do, too. But y'all just scared to say it. 'Cause you're members and all that. Well, I ain't a member there. When Steve Harvey finally returned to the stage, the applause came slow, hesitant, uncertain. Should they cheer, stay silent, pretend nothing happened? No one knew, because for the first time in years, the man who usually commanded every second of the room had lost control of it. He didn't walk back with a punchline. He didn't strut like the king of the stage. He walked back quietly, shoulders lower, steps slower, like a man trying to balance something no one else could see, but everyone could feel. For once, Steve Harvey didn't look untouchable. He looked human. And that's where the truth comes in. Comedy, for Steve, has never just been about laughter. He's said it 100 times. Humor was his survival tool. From growing up poor in Cleveland to sleeping in his car chasing a dream, laughter wasn't just his talent. It was his armor. His way of taking pain, shaping it, and making it bearable. But that night, the laughter wasn't enough. What weighed on his chest wasn't a missed joke or a bad cue card. It was life itself. Behind the cameras, he'd been running on fumes. Not the kind of tired a nap could fix, but the kind that comes from years of carrying everything at once: his family, finances, expectations. Television shows, talk shows, books, business ventures, all stacked one on top of another until even Steve Harvey, the man who could make the world laugh, forgot how to breathe. On the outside, Steve Harvey looked unstoppable. Every show sold out, every camera loved him, every punchline landed. But behind that perfect image was a man running on fumes. Add the personal battles, the strain of marriage, the endless scrutiny from the media, and the crushing weight of being a brand instead of just a man, and you had the perfect storm. That night, standing under the lights, he couldn't keep it contained any longer. His body made the choice his mind refused to stop, to breathe, to step away. The irony was almost poetic. The man who had built an empire teaching others how to push through pain had finally reached his own breaking point. And it was both shocking and profoundly human. But the real twist wasn't that Steve Harvey walked off stage. It was what happened when he came back, when the king of comedy stripped away the crown and spoke not as a performer, but as a man. The crowd went silent. Every camera, every breath in the room waited. What could he possibly say after a moment like that? What truth could silence an entire arena more completely than laughter ever could? The reveal was coming, and no one was ready for it. He adjusted the mic, let out a breath, and said quietly, "Man, I'm good. Working on my health, man. Most important thing right now. I'm good. I've entered a new phase." The room stayed still. For once, you could hear the sound of nothing. Then, in true Steve Harvey fashion, he laughed, but it wasn't that booming, chest-shaking laugh the world knows. It was softer, uneasy, the kind of laugh a man lets out when he's standing face to face with his own truth. Y'all ever hit that point where you don't even know if you want to be funny no more? Steve said it with a half laugh and a shake of his head. The audience chuckled nervously at first, unsure if it was another setup or something deeper. But Steve wasn't joking. He went on to confess that he was tired. Not the kind of tired a night's sleep could fix, but the kind that builds from years of being expected to perform on stage, on camera, even in life. He admitted he'd been holding it all in, the stress, the responsibility, the pressure to keep everyone smiling while struggling to find his own. "I've been making everybody laugh," he said, tapping his chest, "but I almost forgot how to laugh for myself." That line hit like a thunderclap. The crowd fell silent, not because it wasn't funny, but because it was real. For years, fans had only seen the polished entertainer, the sharp suits, the quick wit, the man who always had an answer. But that night, he pulled back the curtain, and the world saw Steve Harvey, the man, not the brand. Still, even in his rawest moment, humor slipped through like sunlight through a storm. "Don't get me wrong," he grinned. "I ain't quitting. I'm too broke to quit. You know how many kids I got? Grandkids. If I quit, they gon' eat me alive." The room erupted in laughter, but this time it wasn't just laughter. It was relief. In that moment, Steve reminded everyone that sometimes the funniest people carry the heaviest burdens. His walk-off wasn't weakness, it was human. It was a reminder that even the strongest among us need a moment to breathe. But that night wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something else. Because when Steve Harvey walked back under those lights and spoke from his heart, he didn't just open up, he changed direction. "Here's a mistake most people I know make," he said quietly. "I made it too. That's why if I can help somebody see it sooner, maybe that's what I'm here for." That confession wasn't a stumble. It was a mirror he held up not only to himself, but to the world that had watched him rise, fall, and rise again. If Steve's story has taught us anything, it's this: the bigger the spotlight, the darker the shadow it casts, and Steve Harvey has known both better than most. The man who made millions laugh has also lived through his share of storms, controversies, heartbreaks, and choices that made headlines louder than his punchlines. Let's take a closer look at the moments that tested him the most. The controversies that followed the laughter long after the curtain fell. Anything to say to your fans? Steve Harvey's comedy was built on a lineage of greats: Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, and yes, Bill Cosby. For decades, Cosby was one of his heroes, a blueprint for success. But when Cosby's reputation collapsed under a wave of assault allegations, most comedians distanced themselves. Not Steve. He didn't defend the crimes, but he refused to erase the man who inspired him. In interviews, he said he owed part of his career to Cosby and couldn't turn his back completely. To some, it was loyalty. To others, denial. In an era demanding zero tolerance, Steve's nuanced stance put him directly in the crosshairs. That moment revealed one of Harvey's deepest contradictions: his faith in redemption. Even when the world demanded punishment, his loyalty runs deep, but sometimes it runs him straight into controversy. If there's one thing tabloids love more than a success story, it's the mess behind it. And Steve Harvey's love life has given them plenty to write about. Married 3 times, he's faced whispers and accusations of infidelity, especially during his second marriage. When he quickly moved on to Marjorie, critics pounced. Even his ex-wife publicly questioned how fast he had moved forward. But love for Steve has always been complicated. He's never hidden behind perfection. He admits he's made mistakes, big ones, and learned from each. "I ain't no saint," he once said. "I'm just a man that keeps trying to get it right." Behind the laughter and the luxury suits, that's the real story. A man still figuring out how to balance grace, guilt, and the need to keep moving forward. Rumors began swirling long before the headlines ever caught up. Whispers that Steve Harvey's now wife Marjorie had entered the picture before his previous marriage had officially ended. Talk of betrayal, broken vows, timing that didn't sit right with the public. To his credit, Steve has never hidden from his past. He's admitted to his mistakes. The failures, the flaws, the moments when the image didn't match the man. "I'm not perfect," he once said, smiling through it, "but I keep trying to get it right. That's why I keep practicing 3 times now." It was classic Harvey humor, softening the sting of scandal with a punchline, and for a while, it worked. But the whispers never fully faded. To many, the image of the wise, family-oriented mentor now carried cracks, small but visible. Still, Steve kept moving, kept working, kept talking about faith, family, and hustle, until another controversy hit, one that painted him not as a flawed husband, but as a cold boss. It was 2017 when a memo from the Steve Harvey Show leaked online, and it spread like wildfire. The tone was blunt, unapologetic, almost militaristic. "Do not approach me in the hallways. Do not speak to me unless I speak to you first. Do not ambush me in the makeup chair." For a man who had built his career on warmth laughter, the memo felt jarring. Social media erupted overnight. Fans who had seen Harvey as America's favorite uncle now saw a different side, one that looked, to many, like arrogance. Headlines called him a diva. Critics said fame had changed him. But Steve pushed back. He defended the memo, saying it wasn't about ego. It was about boundaries. "I just needed everyone to get out of my dressing room," he explained later. "I couldn't even think. I needed a moment of peace." Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was self-preservation. Either way, the damage was done. For some, the memo peeled back the curtain, revealing a man who wasn't always the smiling TV uncle, but a man under constant siege, trying to carve out space in a world that never stopped demanding his energy. And then came the moment that would define his public image for years to come. A single slip, broadcast live across the world. Columbia, the word that changed everything. It was supposed to be the pinnacle of professionalism. Steve Harvey, hosting Miss Universe, the world watching. Then came that moment. He announced the wrong winner. Cameras flashed, confetti fell, tears streamed. And then the truth hit. He had crowned the wrong Miss Universe. The clip went viral in seconds. Memes flooded the internet. Late-night shows feasted on the mistake. For most people, it would have been career-ending. But Steve Harvey, he turned it into a masterclass in humility and humor. He walked back onto that stage, owned his mistake, and apologized, live, unfiltered, and raw. No excuses, no deflection. "I have to apologize?" he said. The first runner-up is Colombia. Miss Universe 2015 is Philippines. The crowd gasped, the world cringed, and Steve Harvey became a global headline overnight. But what could have destroyed him instead became proof of what had always defined him: his ability to fall hard and still stand taller. And of course, no list of Steve Harvey controversies would be complete without the moment, the one that went viral worldwide, launched 1,000 memes, and cemented his place in live TV legend. The 2015 Miss Universe fiasco. On a stage watched by millions, Steve Harvey announced the wrong name. "Miss Columbia," he declared, smiling as the crowd erupted. Confetti fell, cameras zoomed, and a crown touched down until it all came crashing back. Minutes later, Steve returned to the stage, results card trembling in his hand. The real winner wasn't Miss Columbia, it was Miss Philippines. What followed was chaos. Gasp, tears, disbelief. Crowns were exchanged, the audience divided between shock and sympathy. And in that instant, Steve Harvey's reputation was thrown into the fire. Critics shredded him, memes mocked him, social media demanded he never host again. But in true Harvey fashion, he faced the storm head-on. He owned it, he apologized, and then, somehow, he laughed about it. "Do you know how hard it is," he joked later, "to walk back on stage and take a crown off a woman's head? Man, I thought I was about to get stabbed." The mishap nearly broke him, but it also defined him. It revealed his greatest gift: resilience. Not only did he survive the ridicule, he thrived through it, returning to host Miss Universe again and again, each time turning a past embarrassment into living proof that failure doesn't have to be final. Then came 2017, and another storm, this one not about comedy or crowns, but politics. When Steve Harvey walked into Trump Tower to meet then-President-elect Donald Trump, it was meant to be simple. A conversation about housing, education, and community programs. But when the cameras flashed, the optics told a different story. The image of Harvey shaking hands with Trump spread across the internet within minutes, and the backlash was instant. Many of his fans, especially within the black community, felt betrayed. To them, the meeting looked less like outreach and more like alignment. Social media turned savage, branding him a sellout. Steve, blindsided by the fury, tried to explain that his intentions had been genuine. A discussion about helping underprivileged neighborhoods. But in a country deeply divided, explanations weren't enough. "It was supposed to be about doing good," he later said, "but I walked into a fire I didn't see coming." For weeks, the headlines wouldn't let go. Every talk show, every column, every post asked the same question: had Steve Harvey, the man who preached self-belief and community, crossed a line? It was one of the most politically explosive moments of his career. A reminder that in the modern world, even good intentions can ignite public outrage. And yet, once again, he didn't hide. He weathered the criticism, learned from the fallout, and quietly refocused on what mattered most: faith, family, and the people he could still reach. Steve Harvey later admitted he regretted that meeting with Donald Trump. He underestimated how deeply it would cut, how the optics would drown out the intention. "I just wanted to help," he said later, "but I walked straight into something I didn't fully understand." The damage, though, was done. The comedian who had built his brand on uplifting his community now found himself trying to explain why he'd stepped into a political minefield he never needed to enter. Ladies and gentlemen, from Des Moines, Iowa, here's 6-year-old Jay Roy. That's how most people know Steve Harvey. The booming voice, the easy smile, the showman who could light up a room with one joke. But behind the mustache is a man who's as complex as he is charismatic. His loyalty, his flaws, his need for control, his mistakes, his resilience. All of it makes him a man the world can't stop watching. He falls, he stumbles, he gets mocked, and then he stands right back up, mustache intact, and turns the moment into a punchline. That night when he walked off stage and confessed he was simply tired wasn't just a dramatic moment. It was the breaking point of years spent carrying the weight of expectations, headlines, and the constant demand to perform. It was the night the laughter finally collided with the truth. And yet, in pure Steve Harvey fashion, he did what he's always done. He turned pain into a story worth telling. It didn't happen that quick. It was about 4 minutes of pure hell. For most entertainers, the string of controversies Steve Harvey endured would have ended their careers. Defending Bill Cosby, a PR disaster. Infidelity scandals, enough to shatter the family man image forever. The leaked staff memo, proof. Some said that the smile was only for the cameras. The Miss Universe fiasco, that alone could have sent any host into permanent hiding. Add the political backlash after meeting Donald Trump, and by all accounts, Steve Harvey's career should have been over. But if there's one thing Steve Harvey knows better than anyone, it's how to bounce back. Not quietly, not slowly, but louder, stronger, and funnier. Each fall became material. Each controversy another setup. Each lesson another punchline waiting to land. Because for Steve Harvey, failure isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the next chapter. The part where faith, grit, and humor meet redemption. Steve Harvey didn't just survive controversy, he somehow turned it into fuel. One of his greatest strengths has always been his ability to own it. Where most celebrities try to bury their scandals, Steve turned his into stories. After the Miss Universe fiasco, he didn't hide behind silence or spin. He walked right back on stage, laughing through the very moment that almost ended him. He cracked jokes about it on talk shows, made it part of his stand-up, and in true Harvey fashion, made the world laugh with him instead of at him. "Listen," he said in one interview, "I read the wrong name. Y'all act like I read the wrong Bible verse. Calm down." By leaning into humiliation rather than running from it, he flipped the narrative. What could have been career-ending became iconic. His mistake became a meme, and that meme kept him relevant. "Everything you're going through," Steve once said, "is preparing you for what you asked God for. You just gotta quit tripping while you in the process." The process is necessary. Faith had always been part of his story, but after the storms, it became the anchor. In the aftermath of his controversies, Steve Harvey leaned harder into his Christian faith than ever before. On his radio show, talk segments, and interviews, he spoke about grace, prayer, and the long road of forgiveness, both giving it and asking for it. He stopped pretending to be perfect. Instead, he became transparent, a man who had fallen short, failed publicly, and yet still believed he was meant for something bigger. Critics rolled their eyes, but millions of fans saw something rare: honesty. They saw a man who wasn't hiding behind fame or image. A man who kept trying to be better. That raw, flawed, spiritual honesty became the cornerstone of his redemption. By the time the controversies hit, Steve Harvey wasn't just a comedian, he was an empire. The Steve Harvey Morning Show, Family Feud, best-selling books like Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, motivational tours, speaking engagements, syndicated shows across continents. Even when one door closed, 10 others were already open. When his daytime talk show Steve was canceled after the memo backlash, he didn't fade. He he pivoted. He built new platforms, launched new projects, and doubled down on what mattered most, controlling his narrative. He made himself too big to cancel. That's the genius of Steve Harvey. He never stayed in one lane long enough to be trapped in it. What's even more remarkable is how he used his missteps. The failed marriages and rumors of infidelity. He turned them into relationship lessons, the very backbone of his best-selling books. The leaked staff memo. It became a conversation about mental health and personal boundaries. The political backlash from meeting Donald Trump, a lesson in perception, humility, and hindsight. Each controversy became content, each failure a sermon. He reframed scandal into wisdom, pain into perspective, and made it all part of his brand. Instead of letting his mistakes define him, he turned them into stepping stones towards something deeper purpose. If you don't want nothing to happen to you, Steve once said, quit asking for stuff. You can simplify your life right now. Just quit wanting something. But that's a hard life. At the end of the day, Steve Harvey's greatest comeback weapon wasn't PR, fame, or fortune. It was humor. When the world turned against him, he did what he's always done. He laughed. And laughter, in Harvey's hands, is disarming. By laughing at himself, he gave audiences permission to forgive him. By being vulnerable, he reminded people that even the biggest stars are still human. That night when he admitted he was tired, it wasn't weakness, it was truth. And that truth became the foundation of his redemption. People don't love Steve Harvey just because he's funny. They love him because he's real. How do you see your philanthropic work with the Harvey Foundation converging with your entertainment platforms? Well, Steve replied, my career is what I'm paid for. But my calling is what I'm made for. That's where Steve Harvey stands today, no longer just chasing success, but living out purpose. Through the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation, he's focused on mentoring youth, promoting financial literacy, and uplifting underserved communities. He's traded some of the spotlight for something more lasting: legacy. Because in the end, the story of Steve Harvey isn't just about fame or failure. It's about a man who fell, got back up, and learned how to laugh through the climb. A man who proved that the best punchline in life isn't the one that makes people laugh. It's the one that makes them feel. I'm trying to do as much as I can for young people. Looking back, it almost feels poetic. The very things that could have destroyed Steve Harvey ended up cementing his legacy. The Miss Universe mishap made him unforgettable. The leaked staff memo sparked a larger conversation about boundaries in high-pressure industries. The Trump meeting, though damaging, forced him to clarify his values and reconnect with his audience. The marital controversies gave him material for relationship advice that sold millions of books. And even his support for Bill Cosby, while controversial, revealed his stubborn loyalty, a trait that, for better or worse, defines who he is. Together, these moments created a paradox. Steve Harvey is both one of the most criticized and one of the most beloved entertainers of his generation. He's been called arrogant, flawed, even hypocritical, but also resilient, wise, and deeply inspiring. The truth is, he's all of those things, and that complexity is exactly why people can't stop watching him. Today, Steve Harvey isn't just a comedian. He's a mentor, a businessman, a motivational force, and yes, still a walking headline. But unlike before, he now seems at peace with who he is. The man who once walked off stage in exhaustion has learned to pace himself, set boundaries, and speak with purpose. And maybe that's the real lesson of his journey. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You don't have to be scandal-free to be successful. You just have to keep standing up after every fall. Keep laughing even when the world points fingers, and keep turning your mistakes into messages. Because for Steve Harvey, the controversies didn't break him, they built him. They forced him to evolve from just another funny man with a mustache into a living symbol of perseverance. Because if you can read the wrong name in front of millions, survive 3 marriages, face political backlash, get roasted by the internet, and still make people laugh the next day, you're not just an entertainer, you're a survivor. And maybe that's why Steve Harvey remains one of the most unforgettable figures in modern entertainment. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold journeys of icons who turned pain into purpose. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep standing tall.